Thank you. Welcome to First Church Boston on this nice, not terribly hot, reasonably hot, late July Sunday morning. Welcome those of you who are here in person, and welcome those who are watching on YouTube. Hi there. Or will be watching in the future. I can't even be sure you're all here now. You might be watching this a year from now. I'm Peter Bonos, member of the Standing Committee, and I'm your coordinator for the day. I'm here to welcome you all, as I have done, and to welcome especially anyone who is visiting here for the first time, passing through town, or having recently moved, or whatever your story is. Those of you who are on YouTube could be anywhere for all I know, but of the people present, I believe the record for distance traveled to get here goes to Chobo from Brasov, Transylvania. Welcome, Chobo. Same given name as the former minister of the Second Church, Kolozhvar, who visited here a few times decades ago. I'm back. Welcome, everybody. If you couldn't hear me, I should... That is not good. Let's see how... from down here, so we'll get picked up. You don't have to go too slow. Is this on? Can everybody? I believe it's only for the stream. Okay. So speak loudly but close to the microphone, and that'll help people hear our loud. Guest minister for the day, Stevie Carmody, who is the MRE, Minister for Religious Education at First Parish, Arlington. And bus will solve it. Don't think that this didn't used to happen, that it's only the modern technology. When we were on WERS, we were blanking out for no reason at all several times a year. Welcome again. Welcome to Chobo from Brasho. Welcome all of you. Welcome to our guest minister, Stevie Carmody from First Parish, Arlington. It is a testimony to the plethora of Unitarian Universalist congregations in the neighborhood of Boston that we have two that are named Arlington. Stevie's from Arlington Town, not Arlington Street. If you're new and here in person, stick around for coffee hour. You can ask any of us any questions you might have about First Church in particular or Unitarian Universalism in general. If you're at a distance and cannot do that, visit our website or call our office for more information. Okay, that's enough for that. Announcements, luckily there are not many announcements because it's going to be August and nothing happens in August. We will have our services regularly, but there's not a great deal else going on. However, things will get back into swing in September. Typically the Sunday after Labor Day weekend, we will have our Charter Day service and our Gathering Sunday, and a Save the Date item on the last weekend of September, Saturday the 28th and Sunday the 29th, a climate revival weekend. And last time I was in touch with Mary Lou McLean, our point person on this topic, the planning was very much a work in progress. So I understand I've been signed up to be a discussion leader, but Mary Lou wasn't quite sure what that would involve. We'll tell you more when we find out, or you can visit the UUA website and find out what they know, but save the date. And with that, let our worship begin.
I invite you to take a breath with me as we settle into our worshipful time together. Maybe you're finding your feet on the ground. You've arrived. Whether you're streaming in or you're here with us in person, welcome. Welcome to worship. When we arrive in worship, we've come here on many paths, and yet here we are finding ourselves centered around this same thing together. We're here woven into this circle for just a bit, and then we'll continue on. Breathing deeply as we come into worship, we acknowledge all that we hold that might be holding on to us from our weeks, from our lives right now. As much as possible, what would it be to put down those things for a moment? To let them rest here in your community, knowing full well that when this hour is through, you can pick those things back up and continue on your way. And so we light our chalice this morning in a spirit of contemplation. Let that spirit of contemplation be with us throughout our worship service today. And as is our custom here, would you rise as you're willing and able and recite with me our First Church Boston affirmation, which can be found in your order of service. Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. You can turn now and say hello and introduce yourself to those gathered with us. And hello online.
Yes, I've been with the choir for 2 years. No, I'm actually from Illinois, so I moved here in 2020, so whirlwind.
And if you would stay rising and sing with us our hymn number 38, Morning Has Broken. Hymn number 38. Good morning again. My name is Stevie, and I'm learning how strong this mic is. And I invite us all to contemplate this story together. So all along the meadow where the cows grazed and the horses ran, there was this stone wall. And in that wall, not far from where the old barn and granary stood, a chatty family of field mice made their home. But the farmer had moved away and the barn was abandoned and the granary stood empty. And since the winter was not far off, the little mice began to gather corn and nuts and wheat and straw. They all worked day and night, all of them except Frederick. "Frederick, why don't you work?" they asked. "I do work," said Frederick. "I gather sun rays for the cold winter days." And when they saw Frederick sitting there, staring at the meadow, they said, "And now, Frederick?" "I gather colors," answered Frederick simply, "for winter is gray." And once Frederick seemed half asleep. "Are you dreaming, Frederick?" they asked very judgmentally. But Frederick said, "Oh no, I am gathering words. For the winter days are long and many and will run out of things to say." Well, those winter days did come. And when the first snow had fell, those 5 little mice took their hideout in the stones. And at the beginning, there was lots to eat, and the mice told stories with one another about foolish foxes and silly cats. They were a happy family. But little by little, they had nibbled all the nuts and berries. The straw was gone. The corn was only a memory. It was cold in the wall, and no one felt like chatting. Then they remember what Frederick had said about sun rays and colors and words. "What about your supplies, Frederick?" they asked. "Close your eyes," said Frederick as he climbed a big stone. "Now I send you the rays of the sun. Do you feel how they're golden glaze?" And as Frederick spoke of the sun, the 4 little mice began to feel warmer. Was it Frederick's voice? Was it magic? "And how about the colors, Frederick?" they asked anxiously. "Close your eyes again," said Frederick. And when he told them of the blue periwinkles, the red poppies of the yellow wheat, and the green leaves of the berry bush, they saw those colors as clearly as if they had been painted in their minds. "And the words, Frederick?" Frederick cleared his throat, waited a moment, and then, as if from a stage, he said, "Who scatters the sunflakes? Who melts the ice? Who spoils the weather? Who makes it nice? Who grows the 4 leaves of clover in June? Who dims the daylight? Who lights the moon? 4 little field mice who live in the sky. 4 little field mice, like you and I. One is the spring mouse who turns on the showers. Then comes the summer who paints with the flowers. The fall mouse is next with walnuts and wheat, and the winter is last with little cold feet. Aren't we lucky the seasons are 4? Think of a year with 1 less or 1 more." Then Frederick had finished, and they all applauded. "But Frederick," they said, "you are a poet." Frederick blushed, took a bow, and said, "I know it."
And now is the time where we share with our community, if we choose, any joys or concerns that are on our minds or in our hearts this Sunday. So if you have something you want to say, or simply want to put a pebble in our water glass, now is your time. Stand up, come forward, have your turn. Rosemary.
Thank you, Peter. And this is kind of a joy. We, in August, one thing is happening. We're going to have an after-church discussion of the Common Read, the UU pick for Common Read. And I believe that's going to happen on Sunday, August the 18th after church. If I have a group of folks who I know are interested, if anybody who hasn't let me know is interested, please do that today. Thank you.
Thank you for helping fill the month for us. Ita.
Thank you, Peter. I know some of you. I'm Geeta, and I just wanted to say two things I'd like to share. One is I joined the congregation less than 6 months ago, but I really feel like I found a new family. And the second is I'm so delighted to have my niece, Tanya, and her daughter, Amani, here from London. This is so special to me that I really wanted to share this with her. And the third thing is, I know we are in this election is, we all know, is momentous, historic in so many ways, and we are in an age of anxiety. Rosemary was kind enough to forward me the link to the UU The Vote meeting that's going to happen on Zoom on Tuesday the 30th. And if like me and Rosemary and others, you share our common concerns, please reach out to her and she can send you the information for signing up for mobilizing the UU vote. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
I have one joy, which I would like to share, and a concern. I'll do the concern first. My wife, Anna, is now in a rehab down in Braintree. She is making very slow progress. She probably would like to get visits or telephone calls from any and everybody that is there. So please do so. When I was on vacation, she fell, but fortunately we had a group within our building, the network, who A, helped her up, B, took care of the house, and C, went out and got her t-shirts for her wardrobe. So I would like you to do more than thoughts and prayers. I would like to have you call her and wish her well, give her cards, etc. She needs some encouragement. I've done as much as I can. And I would like to share a joy with Joe, who realized when it is time to take your final bow. And I was put in mind of Senator Aiken of Vermont, who had the perfect solution to our invasion of Vietnam. His solution was declare a victory and go home. Joe, 50 years of service, I reckon that's about enough time for anybody. He passed the torch, and now let us see what will happen the next 99 days. So one for Anna, and one for Joe.
Thank you. I will refrain from political comments. Our visitor from Brasov.
Thanks. I'm not only as a visitor here, I'm also in memoriam of my lovely mother who died 3 weeks ago. So God bless you, Mother.
Thank you for sharing that. Anybody else? Fern, Chair of Membership, welcome.
And thinking about membership, what we're going to do, I see 2 committee members are here now, but we're looking at August as just a very informal going to George's Island, and we'll come up with a date. And they're wonderful with not-for-profits, so, and have a picnic. So, and I'll send something around, so whether you want to do it on a Friday or a Saturday or a Tuesday, all right, but it'll be August. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Fern. Anything else? One personal concern for my community of fellow old folks at Hale House around the corner, including our member John Bergstrom, who are living with an outbreak of COVID, which is why I'm keeping my mask handy. So this is for everyone else that's dealing with the disease that won't go away. And a summary pebble for all the joys and concerns we keep in our hearts and have not chosen to share. They are still important and valued by all of us. Thank you.
With those joys and concerns of our community on our hearts, on our minds, I invite you into a time of prayer and meditation. Grounding of the universe within us, among us, around us, receive our prayer. Grateful are we to have arrived here. Grateful to the river of life that carried us here. Grateful to be present with one another. Gracious spirits, what journeys we have been on since just last week. But we return changed, not just a few days older, but with new resources. Perhaps a quiet hope building, or a moment of solidarity, an aching grief we might have felt amidst a hard loss, a clarity emerging from trying circumstances, or a renewed commitment to be in relationship. Help us to recognize these wisdoms, this knowing, this becoming, to recognize with conviction that which has grown within us. Help us to hold tenderly the places our hearts have grown hard, alive to the possibility of healing. Divine Spirit, may we perceive and embrace the journey of others, those right beside us or streaming in. Help us to see their particularities that make up this love universal. As we call one another home to ourselves through our actions and through our caring, may we commit anew to the calls of this world and the work that may usher in a now that is full of more love, more justice, and more presence. Waking each moment to engage you, O Spirit, we sit together in a moment of silence. Amen, and blessed be. We held that quiet very well, and then I realized it is time to announce that we will be collecting the offering for today to support the life and ministries of First Church Boston, and the offering will now be gratefully given and received. Sing our doxology together, found in your order of service.
The sermon reading for today is a poem by Alberto Rios, December Morning in the Desert. The morning is clouded and the birds are hunched. more cold than hungry, more numb than loud. This crisp Arizona shore where desert meets the coming edge of the winter world. It is a cold news in stark announcement, the myriad stars making bright the black, as if the sky itself had been snowed upon. But the stars, all those stars, where does the sure noise of their hard work go? These plugs sparking the motor of an otherwise quiet sky, their flickering work everywhere in a white vastness. We should hear the stars as a great roar gathered from the moving of their billion parts, this great hot rod skid of the Milky Way across the asphalt night, the assembled moving glints and far-floating embers risen from the hearth fires of so many other worlds. Where does the noise of all of it go? If not into the ears, then hearts of the birds all around us, their hearts beating so fast and their equally fast wings and high songs. And the bees, too, with their lumbering hum, and the wasps and moths, the bats and the dragonflies, none of them sure if any of this is going to work. This universe, we humans oblivious, drinking coffee, not quite awake, calm and moving into the slippers of our Monday mornings, shivering because we think it's a little cold out there.
It's a real pleasure to be here. My name is Stevie, and since we don't know each other very well, I want to introduce myself as the Minister of Religious Education down in Arlington, Massachusetts. It's a job where I get to support the life of a lot of young Unitarian Universalists, children and families there. It's really meaningful work, but to have the opportunity to preach, I really appreciate it. I think in types of sermons, this is one of those ones that asks the question, what are we doing here? What are we doing here together? How can we be together in the way we want to be? But by way of getting into it, I am reminded of conversations, especially early on when I was becoming a minister, where I would go home to relatives, cousins, uncles, and they would ask me, what do you do during the day? Because it's a little bit of a strange profession, this thing called ministry. And I would tell them about meetings that I would have with coworkers or the groups that I would help facilitate. I sure do answer a lot of emails or I talk on the phone. And I listen to people closely if they want to share something. And hopefully I'm building relationships with people in my congregation or the wider community. But I tell those relatives, and I'll tell you now, when I have a worship coming up, I say, I spend a lot of time thinking about the worship, researching and writing and talking about whatever the theme for that day would be, selecting the right elements to it, crafting the message, weaving it all together. And so I realized in those conversations with my relatives that I am being paid to contemplate. What an enormous privilege to get to do that as your job. When I was in San Diego, one of the ministers in that area, she put it this way. When we were talking about worship and sermon preparation, she spoke about how she takes those big questions, the big questions for her community or for the world or for that she's wrestling with herself. She would take those big questions and she would go away. And she would wrestle with those things of ultimate concern. And then on Sunday, she would come to the congregation and, in her words, report back. Now, this might be making too much of it, but I think we are supporting. when we are being part of a congregation, public contemplators, public contemplation. Just like that family of mice appreciated Frederick by the end of the story, we have people who serve that contemplative role too. Whether they are the artists or ministers or poets, song leaders, musicians. But also, we are showing, by setting aside this time each week that we value as Unitarian Universalists, a time for contemplation for everyone. And we gather together around some theme, a big idea, an aspiration, a challenge. And we hope, in setting aside that time, and sidebar, I'm reminded of the roots of the word contemplation. Con meaning with, and templum being something sacred. So contemplation means bringing ourselves into the sacred. Anyway, in setting aside this time, we hope that in worship, something might fill us up, and that it might spill over into our lives. We hope that the words that we sing here today might return to us just when our souls might be needing a little support. Or that story you might have heard last month might arrive in your head at just the right moment when we're struggling to understand a person who has wronged us, and something in us might move. And suddenly there might be an avenue for repair. I know these are big hopes. Or we hope that we might hear a message from the pulpit that would call each of us into whatever is our next step. The step from where we are to where we hope to be. Or that we hope that some silence that we shared last week might offer us a little bit more presence to be with someone we love who is hurting. I know I hope for these things. And we hope for a lot in our public time of contemplation. And yet, and here's the point of the sermon, we get in our own way. I want to share just a moment. It'll be 30 seconds, painless. I want you to think back to the last week that you just had. And I want you to think about something, or a few things, that you haven't gotten around to doing. You're supposed to, but you didn't do it yet. And we're just going to speak them out. It's a little bit of a risk-taking on a Sunday morning, but just speak out in a word or a phrase, something that you haven't done yet. Fill out that paperwork.
Get rid of newspapers. I'm going to read Sunday that never comes until they end up getting yellow and become historic documents. I must get an accumulator. I'm not sure if I believe in reincarnation, but I suspect if it's true, I may have been a squirrel or a pack in a previous life.
It didn't take us much to think of a few things we haven't done yet. And yet I'd push us to imagine if we suddenly found ourselves with a little time. Say a meeting was canceled, or the commute went faster than normal, or the microphone stops working on a Sunday morning worship service, and we found ourselves with a little bit of time. Would spending time in contemplation rise to the top of our list? In the grace of those extra moments, would we have time to attend to the sacred? Or would our minds immediately go to the to-do list? Or would we perhaps, as I am often doing, scrolling on my phone? But hear me, this is not exactly a moralizing, judgmental sermon, because I'm not asking you to add contemplation to your to-do list. And I'm not trying to get all judgy, because you should know, I haven't gone on a run in a couple weeks, haven't sat and meditated for a few days. I'm trying to tell you that spending some time with the sacred exceeds the to-do list, that it might burst forth into our lives if we only give it the opportunity. There's a wisdom I've been practicing for a long time living with, and that's the spiritual practice of the Sabbath, a day I set aside each week. This alternative wisdom comes from I learned it through the great 20th century Jewish rabbi and civil rights leader, Abraham Joshua Heschel. Now, Heschel writes, "The Sabbath is not for the sake of the weekdays, but the weekdays are for the sake of the Sabbath. The Sabbath is not an interlude from the rest of our lives, but it is in fact the climax of living." Now, this time set aside has deep roots in the Jewish tradition, where the Sabbath is a time commanded by God. It's a time of rest, where a people are called to take up reflection and prayer and song and share meals together, and where a people are called to abstain from work and labor and sometimes even the use of technology. But to imagine this reframe interpreted for our lives, that we don't do contemplative things so that we can be more productive members of society, or so that we will be more efficient with that ever-growing to-do list. And this is for another sermon, it doesn't escape me that words like productive or efficient are words from the factory floor or the plantation. But instead, we are working together throughout our days in all our labors that we might build a space and time in our lives that we can bring ourselves into closer relationship with that which is of ultimate concern. That through the richness of repose and meaning making, we can love more fully, we can live more deeply, we can act more justly. These are huge hopes. But if you've gotten to this point of listening to me speak about contemplation and you still feel like there's no time for it in your lives, have you heard about the story when Jesus took a nap? It's one of those funny stories from the Bible. Now, biblical characters falling asleep is not unique to this story. The young Samuel awakens to God's call. The disciples fall asleep during Jesus' praying on the mountainside. But in each of those stories, waking up from sleep was always a metaphor for awakening to the divine. But in this story, Jesus seems to be just taking a nap. See, he's been preaching all day, telling parables to the multitudes and interpreting them for his disciples. And everyone is tired out. And this group of former fishers do what they do best, and they head out in the boat to their next destination across the sea. And Jesus, meanwhile, goes below deck and he takes a nap. Now, a storm is whipping up, and the disciples get anxious. Because doesn't it always feel like a storm is whipping up? And they wake Jesus, and he comes up and he calms everyone down and he calms the storm, and I think he just goes back to sleeping. But I was reminded of this story as I prepared for this sermon, and I went looking for a little more context. And earlier in the chapter of Mark's Gospel, Jesus is telling parables about what it means, as we might put it, to live a spiritually full life. That's what we've been talking about, a spiritually full life. And there's that one parable about the seed sower who casts seeds rather absent-mindedly. And I think the places where the seeds land in the story are metaphors for the ways that we might live our lives. And there are seeds that fall on rocky ground, or they fall amongst thorns, and they cannot take root, or they get choked out by the cares of the world. But there are those that fall on rich soil, and they take root and flourish. So too, contemplation gives us fertile ground for the stuff of the sacred to take root in in our lives. And I take it as no small coincidence that just after Mark describes these parables on how to live a spiritually fulfilled life, he describes Jesus taking a nap. Even Jesus needed time for repose. But if you've gotten to this point in the sermon, listening to me tell Bible stories and speaking about the value of contemplation, and you still hear that persistent voice inside your head, but there's no time, know that I am still with you. I still hear that voice too. But this is the truth that I know, that even in the very acts of contemplation, they depend upon community. I remember a time I thought I could contemplate alone, but I ended up having no time for it. In my first year of college, in a tiny little school in the high deserts of Eastern California, it's a school with 40 or so community members, and there's a self-governance program, a labor program. We devoted ourselves to big ideas and learning new things together. And I came to the end of a particularly stormy term at that place. And I realized I wanted to spend some solitary time in contemplation. So I decided to take myself on a little camping trip out to the desert. And I can tell that I was gearing up for contemplation because of all the things I brought with me. There was the sleeping bag and the clothes and the peanut butter and jelly sandwiches that I packed. But I had also filled my backpack with my painting kit and the books I hadn't finished reading for class that term, and my journal, and even my copy of the Bible. And a friend of mine drove me out to this secluded place in the valley where there was a little stream and a little grove of mesquite trees, and that would be my contemplative camp for the time being. But the truth is, I never got around to journaling, nor painting, nor going through my reading, or studying the Bible, because it was mid-January, and it was cold. What I remember instead is the smell of the smoke from the burning mesquite wood, and how quickly it burned, because it wasn't a hard wood, and I kept having to gather more and more wood, piling it on the fire. And I remember the taste of 2-day-old dried out peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and how intimately I was aware of every single little hole in the foot of my sleeping bag where the draft would get in. I spent the time that I had set aside for contemplation instead in the labor of staying alive. The labor of staying alive. The 20th century German philosopher Hannah Arendt once wrote a book called The Human Condition, and in it she pondered about what the history of Western philosophy has to say about what it means to be human. Oh my word, that's a big task. And she's investigating the contemplative life, and she makes this observation, which I have to share with you. Think of who, from a Eurocentric view, is held up as the great contemplators of history. My mind goes to the Greek and Roman philosophers and theologians who lived in this golden age of philosophical thought, who gathered together in the public square in great debates, or who hid away in a high tower writing tracts upon tracts. The very ones who give us this language of the contemplative life. And Arendt points out that those Greek and Roman societies were slave societies. Societies that depended on inequality and exploitation to allow for the freedom and repose of the few. The labor of some made it possible for others to contemplate. So this is the deep historical resonance booming in my head when I say it is a privilege to have a job where I contemplate. And while we don't live in a slave society any longer, we still live in a society that holds great inequality, that still even bears the echoes of inequity and exploitation of that slave society of our not too distant past. And it means functionally that the, quote, labor of staying alive, as I put it, is disproportionately held by some and not others. In today's time, our, quote, labors of staying alive include things like childcare, picking produce, cleaning, cooking food, caregiving for the sick and elderly. And there are some who do these things who might rightly agree there's no time for contemplation. We Unitarian Universalists, then, who hold up a value of contemplation alongside our values of equity, of freedom, of love, we also hold up a commitment to justice, which means that we know that an awareness of power must always be part of our questions of ultimate concern. That's what I think it means to be UUs and care about justice, is that our questions of ultimate concern have to do with power and equality and fairness. So wide-eyed, we hold up this value of contemplation. It means, too, we must value the labor that makes such contemplation possible, and caring in the communities we make about sharing more equitably that labor. I'll give you a few examples to just spark your imagination. Imagine the Volunteer Child Care Collective in Providence, where I used to live, so that single moms could attend organizing meetings. For surely, I would include building community power as a type of contemplation. And imagine over in Arlington, those who fill up the lay ministry freezer at that congregation with meals cooked for grieving families. Because surely, taking time to be in grief is also a form of contemplative action. Imagine our wonderful volunteers here who cook so that we may eat together, who are part of the governing body so that we might have a building where we can come and have time for contemplation, for our greeters so that some may welcome newcomers while others have a time for quiet repose here in the sanctuary. Bless those volunteers. Bless them with your gratitude, and also being part of this congregation, bless them with your name on the sign-up list. The point I'm trying to make with all these examples is that we need to imagine differently the way society has been set up around who contemplates and who labors, and that we can joyfully give our labors for the contemplation of others. And we can graciously receive the opportunities to contemplate, knowing what preciousness and meaning it may give to our lives. How might we make this a reality in our community? Just to wrap it all up, what we might be going for, to call back to our Frederick story, is a family where everyone had time both to dream and write poetry and store up grain for the winter months. What if contemplation was not some solitary thing you're supposed to add to your to-do list, but a glorious gift we could receive and give to one another in our laboring, in our holding space for one another, building up not just the sacred that lives within ourselves, but also the sacred which resides within the wider community of which we are a part. May that be so. Would you rise in body or in spirit and join me in singing hymn number 100 from the great hymnal? I got peace like a river.
I've got peace like a river.
The moment has come in our service to extinguish the chalice. Would you say these chalice extinguishing words with me? Commitment. These we carry in our hearts till we are together again. As we let contemplation flow into our lives, may it be so. I offer these closing good words. May we rise like a bird joyfully, and may we fall like a leaf gracefully. When we stand, may we stand like a tree, strong and tall. And when we lie, may we lie like a lake, tranquilly. And when we work, may we work like a bee wholeheartedly. And when we play, let us play like a breeze, refreshingly light and clear. Go in peace.